thank you so much for joining us here at my Mindful Market today here in downtown Willoughby. We are going to be getting started here in just a few minutes, and thank you for everybody who's joined us here on Facebook Live today. Like I said, we will be starting the workshop here in a couple of minutes, and the topic for today is decoding the food label. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. Yeah. Did anyone else need a handout? Did anyone not grab one?
Yes, thank you.
Stephanie, do you have one?
I just got my stuff on. Thank you. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thanks. Do you sleep well?
You guys grab one again.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
Oh,
There you are.
So, yeah, basically they
Brittany.
have different solutions.
Yep. Perfect.
Yes,
I'm marrying a
go live and then we'll be
Continuing.
Hi, Stephanie. I was going to say.
With my tech community, yes, great. I was gonna say, the name sounded familiar. And my husband is, Brian. Yeah, and, switching him over to have
I
Angie
know,
Burgess.
they're kind of
So, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, where's you at the park at?
Brian's getting indoctrinated.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah, very nice. I know, and Marianne. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I ran out of the market.
Hi everyone. Again, thank you so much for coming out today. We are going to be getting started here in another minute or so. So if you haven't signed in yet, please do so. And we do have handouts that we're going to be talking about and going through today. And we do have snacks in the back. And we're here at Mindful Market in downtown Willoughby. Just give us one more minute for those of you joining in on Facebook Live.
Brittany, if anyone needs pens, we have a bunch of pens as well. Anyone wants to take notes?
It's still running.
Deeps. She's nervous. Crazy.
So, starting soon. Hang tight, everybody. We'll be starting in about 2 minutes.
My sister, my sisters.
Yeah. Maybe they're tuning in.
So are a lot of other people.
All right, thank you again, everyone, for joining us here today at my Mindful Market here in downtown Willoughby. And I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone who's joining us in today on Facebook Live through Your Life Nutrition. But first I'm going to have one of the owners of my Mindful Market, also Brittany, spelled the same way, which I love. And she's going to come up here for a second. Tell us a little bit about her store and kick us off today.
All right. So here at my Mindful Market, we like to show everyone that you can have the guilty pleasures you love, but in a good way. So our goal is, when we keep creating new things, is what do we love to eat that's bad for you? How can we make it so we can eat as much as we want without the bad part? So like we have one that we have our oatmeal cranberry bites. They taste like oatmeal cookies, but there's no refined table sugars, there's no preservatives, there's no sodium, no gluten, no dairy, none of the stuff that when you eat a cookie you have to feel guilty about. And we try doing the same thing like edible cookie doughs, we do hummuses, trail mixes, everything with low to no sodium, no gluten, no dairy, the stuff that you don't necessarily need to get the stuff you love. And so anytime you're looking for the guilty pleasure without the guilt, this is where you want to come. And if you have ideas for things, we're always open to trying to make new things to fill that void that you might need if you're trying to eat healthy.
For people on Facebook Live, can you give the address?
We are at 4128 Erie Street, right in downtown Willoughby. We are on the south side of the street, I guess you'd call it. And we are right between Arabica and Malarkey's. And we are closed Mondays, we're open the rest of the week. And then today we have Brittany Cermak. She's a registered dietitian. She's here to help us learn how we can eat what we want, but find the ways that we can look at nutrition labels and see if it's really good for you versus what seems like a good idea. And she went to Ashland University and Case Western University. She received her bachelor's and master's in nutrition. And she's also recently named the recognized Young Dietitian of the Year for 2019 in the state of Ohio.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and thank you, My Mindful Market, for hosting our awesome nutrition workshop today. And I just love today's topic because we're going to talk all about reading a food label and really what all the claims are really about and what they actually mean. So again, thank you to My Mindful Market for bringing me on. I've been partnering with them for the last couple of months, and I love trying their different products. Definitely check out the samples in the back today if you haven't already. They've got some really tasty stuff, and definitely check out some things to take home with you before you leave today. So again, Brittany Cermak is my name, and I am a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I had started my own company called Your Life Nutrition. And I provide things like health counseling, meal planning, and have really helped so many people with weight loss and even sports performance because nutrition can affect so many things. And I'm happy to have a couple of my clients here in the crowd today. And please see me after if you're interested or want to know more. Definitely follow us on social media. Check out my website if you want to stay up to date on the top nutrition tips and information that you need to know. But back to why we're all here. We're here to talk about food labels today. So I just want to throw out this question to you. What do you think about the food label?
Hard to understand.
Hard to understand. Yeah. There's so much on the front and so much on the back. So what do we look at, right? Any other thoughts?
Portion sizes.
Portion sizes. What do they mean? Sometimes it's in ounces, sometimes it's in grams. What the heck is a gram, right? Anything else? If you have food allergies, sensitivities, there's a lot of different things to look at and a lot that the label is trying to throw out and tell you. But here today, I want us to really decode what all of that means. So, just so you know, there have been massive changes in the way the food label is now. The FDA a few years ago decided that, you know what, the label here on the left is outdated. There's information that isn't really understandable, and they wanted to make a change that would help consumers know what's in the product and to make the information more readable. So here on the right hand side you will see the new label. Now they did give an extension on this, and by the start of 2021 is when every food company is going to be required to have this newer label. Okay, so a few changes that we're going to dive into deeper here in a minute. A few changes that were made was that they no longer have calories from fat listed on the label because they found that was kind of confusing. So now instead, which I think is much more useful, the calories is in big, bold font. What we want to know, right? Below the carbohydrates, you will find sugars, and it was kind of confusing because were the sugars naturally occurring, like the kind in fruit, or was it added sugars, like table sugar, right? So what they've now done is, under total sugars, they have put specifically includes the amount of added sugars to that recipe and to that product. And lastly, the label has recently been changed to reflect some more specific nutrients that the government finds that most people can be more deficient in. So things like vitamin D, especially here in the north, we worry about that because we barely get sunlight. And that's where you're going to get the majority of your vitamin D, as well as things like calcium, iron, and potassium. Those have been found to be nutrients of most concern, so they've added those to the label and made that change. Another thing, I know we had an audience member say here earlier, portion sizes, right? What do they mean? What does it say on the label? Well, I'm so happy to say that they're finally reflecting a little bit more of a realistic portion size by putting some different information on the label. I, for one, love ice cream. And did you know that a Ben & Jerry's ice cream pint is not one serving? No, it is not. It's sadly like 5 or 6 servings, and that's sad. So, but now they have actually put the information for what a serving is, what they say a serving is, which is like a half a cup of ice cream, and then they put what the serving, or what the calories and nutrition information is for the entire pint. So at least now, you don't have to do all the math in your head. You don't have to try and downplay how many calories you're actually consuming. It's going to tell you, so you can make more of an informed choice. So that is where I love to start. Whenever I talk to clients, I say, hey, we got to start with serving size. And why? Anyone want to guess? Why do we start with serving size?
So you know how much you should eat.
So we know how much we should eat, what is recommended, but also it's going to change all of the information on the label if we're eating more or less than the serving size. So why even bother looking at anything else unless we know what we got to start with, right? So the serving size really is determined by the manufacturer themselves. So it doesn't necessarily mean the amount that a typical person eats. It's just what they're going to put on the label, and sometimes the serving size is particularly small so that the rest of the information actually looks good, right? So I have a funny story. I went to Cedar Point, and you know how they have all the food vendors, right? So I went to this one cart, and there was this hot pretzel that had a cinnamon roll in the middle. I was like, I'm walking all day. I can afford to eat this, right? Well, it came in a package, and I was like, well, I'm not looking at the nutrition information until after I've eaten it, because why depress myself, right? So then I look at the nutrition pack after, and it said, I didn't follow my own instructions, right? I jumped right to calories, and it said, oh, 250 calories for this hot pretzel. I'm like, dang, that's not bad. Then I jump up to serving size, 4 servings. One pretzel, and I'm not talking this pretzel the size of, you know, whatever. It was a standard size hot pretzel. And then I was like, oh. So the food companies will make a portion size to make the rest of their label look okay, because a lot of people miss looking at the serving size first. So yeah, when you look at, oh, 250, that's not bad. And again, that's why we got to check. So always compare your portion to what you are, what is actually recommended on the label, so you know what you're consuming. The next thing, always check out the calories. So again, that goes back to knowing what's the serving size and how many calories that's going to be. And definitely watching your calories if you know you're trying to lose weight, right? Snacking is delicious and it's great, and it can be purposeful if it's helping you carry over to the next meal, but it isn't necessarily the best thing if you're trying to lose weight. So be mindful of that. So the next thing I want us to talk about is the fat type. Does anyone know what kinds of fats we have? There's like 3 different main types.
Saturated fat.
Saturated fat and
Polyunsaturated fat? Polyunsaturated fat?
yeah, we got a couple. So we have saturated fat, which is solid at room temperature. So think of things like butter and coconut oil, things like that. That is going to be solid at room temperature, so saturated and solid. Then we have unsaturated fat, which you mentioned, and that does break down into monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. The unsaturated fats are the kind that are actually better for our heart. They're liquid at room temperature. Things like your olive oil, your nuts, your seeds, your salmon, things like that. Those are all unsaturated fats. And then we have trans fats and cholesterol. And so the trans fats, definitely something that we want to stay away from. Those have been found to be harmful to our heart. But when we talk about reading the food label, we can see that really only saturated and trans fats are listed. So if we look at this label right here, we see that the total fat is 8 grams, but only 1 gram is saturated. You would subtract that, then there's 7 grams left over, which would mean that that is going to be the unsaturated fat. So labels aren't required to put the unsaturated fat, but you can kind of do the mental math yourself and figure out where that leftover is going to. We had a question?
Are
Yes.
trans fats naturally occurring or manufactured?
Both.
Okay.
Both. And so trans fats will be dangerous to our health when it is being manufactured and it's being used as a cheap fat to throw into products. Now, when we talk about that, we're going to get to that in a few minutes about the ways that food companies have kind of outsmarted the system. They're including trans fats into their products without labeling it as such. We had another question?
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask, like, is trans fat short for something? Like,
No, trans is actually explaining the way the fat looks chemically as a structure inside of the body. So if you take your mind back to chemistry class back in high school, there's cis and trans, which is basically the way the chemical structure is positioned.
gotcha.
So, which when it's trans, it can be harmful to our heart, harmful to our health, our waistline, things like that. So we want to stay away from the trans fat. Great questions. Thank you, everyone. So when we talk about focusing on fat type, we definitely want to limit cholesterol as much as we can, avoid that trans fat and saturated fat. And again, those saturated fats are going to come from things that are solid at room temperature. We also want to be aware of when we read an ingredients list. So again, we can look at ingredients lists all the time, and if we find things like partially hydrogenated oils, palm kernel oils, and even excessive vegetable oils, those can all be things that raise up your blood cholesterol levels, which can lead to heart attack and stroke. So we definitely want to be aware of that. Some of these oils are extremely highly processed, which is another reason why. So oils like olive oil can be very good for us, right? But when oils are heated at high temperatures, when they're being formulated for a product, they can be what's called oxidized, meaning that they're breaking down and they're actually destroying those really beneficial things that we want our body to have. And so when those things are being oxidized, that is what can actually cause more inflammation in the body. So a lot of these oils that I mentioned here, those are all going to be things that are highly processed. They're going to be at a high heat. They're being used for products, so then they can end up being harmful to our body when we consume them, especially at high levels. So things that may have partially hydrogenated oils, it's a lot of packaged and processed products. Why? Because number one, those partially hydrogenated oils are cheap. So companies are going to use them so that they make more money on their product, and that is also adding more weight, and it's a great preservative for their product to make it more shelf stable, especially when we're talking about a thing of Bisquick that can stay on your shelf for 3 years before going bad, right? So those preservatives can be harmful in regards to that. And then trans fats are found in many foods, like it's coming from things like your lard, your shortening, which is used in a lot of baked goods, pizza, fried foods, things of that nature. So when we talk about again, reading labels, we want to be aware of those very, very harmful fats that can be found in our products. Now, this was something that I have often found that my clients are drinking, right? Coffee creamer, what could be bad about that, right? And again, it's the original version. It doesn't have sugar, right? It still does. And because they're trying to make it as shelf stable as possible, they're going to add things like those partially hydrogenated oils to it to help extend the shelf life. You can also see that sugar is lingering in the first or the second ingredient with corn syrup solids. So know what's in your product, and we're going to get more to that in a minute here. So just refreshing your memory on types of fats again. Yes, we had another question.
With the coffee creamer you were saying, so if you don't use coffee creamer, what could you use that is a good alternative?
That's a great question. So the question was, if you are currently using coffee creamer and now you're like, oh, okay, what can I use instead? I highly recommend switching to any kind of milk is at least going to be better, right? Milk has one ingredient, pretty much, right? If you're using even a dairy-free milk, like an almond milk, oat milk I know is super popular right now, cashew milk, any of those, just make sure you're getting the unsweetened version, so that's not going to have added sugar to it. And then they may, and even things like dairy milk is fine. And again, you're at least limiting it to that one ingredient as opposed to a laundry list of ingredients that your body doesn't need. Does that answer your question? Great.
Perfect.
Great question. All right. Getting back to the fats here, so to sum it all up, the types of fats that we want to try and get the most of in our diet, so these are the types of fats that we can use for cooking or that we want to see are in our products, would be things like those monounsaturated fats, which are going to be good for our heart, things like olive oil, but really being aware of how this oil is processed. We do want to look for things like extra virgin olive oil and cold pressed or expeller pressed, again, because that heat can cause that the good fats to become more harmful based on that processing. So we do want to look for that. The other types of fats would be the avocados, the salmon, things like that. The saturated fats are the kind of fats that we do want to stay away from. That's going to be things like your animal fats, so the marbling in a steak, the skin on meat, so on chicken or turkey, things like that, taking the skin off. Any other vegetable fats that are going to be more highly processed, and the trans fats, right? So our pastries, our fried foods, things like that. Just being aware. So sodium. What is sodium another word for?
Salt.
Salt. Oh my gosh, you guys are so smart. Love it. So when we talk about sodium, we can easily find that on the food label, right? So sodium is going to be listed, and really salt is being found as the #1 killer in America, because salt is added into everything. Salt is added because it's a preservative, right? Salt has been used for hundreds of years to preserve things. So why all of a sudden is it so harmful? Well, we're eating a lot of processed products, right? So if it's a little salt here and a little salt there, that is going to add up all day long. And again, if we are not super active, where we need a lot more salt to keep us going and to keep us hydrated and keep our electrolytes flowing, then we're getting too much. And too much of a good thing is not a good thing, right? So that's another reason why I love My Mindful Market, because they know that adding salt to things isn't necessary, and that they are continuously providing fresh product that isn't going to need to use that as a preservative. So love that about them. But again, when we look at and survey the sodium on a label, we want to try for the entire day, especially if you have high blood pressure, to stay below 2,300 milligrams a day. If you have high blood pressure that you're trying to control through medication, I would definitely even try and take it down a step further and aim to not consume any more than 1,500 milligrams of salt a day, which is really tough if we eat out and if we eat any packaged or processed products at all. You can look for the verbiage on a food label, which would say like low sodium. And low sodium means that it would have to have 140 milligrams or less per product. So in regards to canned items can get a really bad rap that they have a lot of salt. Well, because why? When you're canning something, you are preserving it and making it last longer. But there are a lot of products now that are using no salt added verbiage and low sodium on their labels. So definitely take a look at that. And especially if you are using any canned products, especially this time of year, it's soup season, right? It's chilly weather. So don't be afraid of the canned items. Try and look for the no salt added or the low sodium. And you can always drain and rinse whatever you are buying to at least help get rid of some of the extra salt. You're not going to get rid of everything, but it does help. We have another question?
So, like, for the no salt added, what would they be using as a preservative? Is it healthier, or is it something that could be worse?
They may be using things like citric acid, which is like vitamin C, and that helps to preserve it. They're just going to use maybe some other methods, and it may just not have as long of a shelf life as the other types of products on the market that are going to use salt as a preservative. Great question.
Thanks.
So below sodium, we are going to jump over to carbohydrates. What are carbs? What are carbs?
Delicious.
Yes, that is a great point. I will completely agree with you on that. Yes.
Energy.
Carbs do give you energy. They are the main fuel source for the brain. Yes, that is true. So carbs really break down into total sugars, added sugars, and fiber, because carbohydrates are your starchy foods, your starchy vegetables, like even potatoes, even those are carbs too. Your breads, your pasta, your rice, oats, all of those things contain carbs. But we do want to look at what is the composition of those carbs. Again, so if we look at the sugars, added sugars, and fiber, that's going to tell us a really good story as to how good are these carbs for us, right? So when we look at a label here, the fiber content, we would want to look to be higher. Fiber is one of those things that is going to keep you fuller for longer, provides a ton of nutrition, helps you go number 2, which everyone is happy when they can be regular, and it is really good for your heart health. So consuming more fiber can actually act almost as like a street sweeper through your blood vessels and clear out some of that extra cholesterol, which is great because the last thing we want is to worry about things like heart attack or stroke. So consuming more fiber on a daily basis is great. You can get that from fruits and from vegetables or whole grains like oats, brown rice, whole wheat pasta, whole wheat breads, things like that. If you're wondering whether or not your product is whole grain, you can always look for these little stamps that would be listed maybe either on the front or the back of the packaging. And this comes from the Whole Grains Council. And if it's 100% whole grain, this is a good product for your heart health. So 100% whole grain would mean that, let's visualize you are a farmer, right? You are looking at wheat swaying in the field. If it is a whole grain, it is using that entire stalk of wheat, all of the parts of the grain, the germ, the bran, and the endosperm. So all of those are going to be used. Now, if it is a white product, it's stripping most of that, and you're just left with the carbs. You're not left with all that good nutrition and all that good fiber. So looking for the whole grains is going to be really great for you. And when we talk about sugar next, we want sugar to be lower, fiber to be higher, right? So sugars can be naturally occurring. So if you're going to get brown rice, it might say that has, some sugars in it, but it's going to be because of the naturally occurring sugars that are in grains or in milk. You'll see that milk has sugars in it. How? It's plain milk. Because milk has lactose, and lactose is a milk sugar. Doesn't mean it's table sugar, it's just a naturally occurring sugar that is present in milk. But what is very helpful to us now, because we have the government who has redone our food labels, now we can see what added sugar is actually there, right? So if you're looking at 2 different kinds of bread, let's just say, and one has 1 gram of added sugars and the other one has 10 grams of added sugars, we would know to try and get that 1 gram of added sugar one as opposed to the 10 grams. We definitely want to just use common sense, right? If something has added sugars in it, it doesn't make sense, we want to put it back. and say, maybe I could find a healthier product somewhere else, right? Because we don't want added sugars where it doesn't make sense. Added sugars can be found in, you know, whether it's table sugar, whether it's maple syrup or honey or brown sugar. Any of those types of things would be added sugar, as well as corn syrup. So again, just being aware of the types of products that we're consuming, right? So high fiber is definitely what we want to aim for, because that's going to help keep us fuller longer. It's going to provide more nutrition. But here we have two different kinds of oats. They're both steel cut oats, but what's the difference here? So we have the steel cut canister of oats on the one side, and then we have our packages of the brown sugar and cinnamon oats on the other side. So what do we think about this situation here? Which one's going to be higher in sugar, the one on the left or the one on the right?
Right.
Brown sugar added.
It has brown sugar added. Yes, use your context clues, right? So we see brown sugar is literally right in the label. But we could easily get the steel cut oats and add our own sweetness to it and at least control how much sugar that we do add. You can also use things like adding more natural sugar substitutes like a stevia or monk fruit extract or even 100% maple syrup or honey in more minimal amounts to at least control and add less sugar than the kind that they're providing in the box packages. The next thing underneath sugars and carbs we want to look at is the protein. What's protein? Where does protein come from?
Meat and nuts.
Meats, nuts, cheese, dairy, yes. Tons of different products. Soy, yes. Eggs, all of those. So we can get protein from animals and plants, which is why it is a myth that vegans can't get enough protein. It is definitely false. You can get it from lots of different areas. So if you are concerned if you're getting enough protein, definitely let me take a look at what you're eating, and I'd be happy to let you know that. But when we look at the protein, the percent daily value, so as we see on the right-hand column here is percent daily value, protein's not required to have a percentage there, and that's because different age ranges and different sexes are going to vary in their protein content. So the government's not going to put that because it's just not a very good, useful piece of information. But if you're curious about how much protein you should get a day, you can kind of calculate it yourself, actually. It's about 0.36 grams per pound of your body weight. So if we had a 150-pound person, it would actually equivalent to 54 grams of protein a day. And this would just be like standard, you know, this isn't like if you're trying to lose weight or gain weight or build muscle or anything. This is just if you were going to stabilize. So again, protein comes in a lot of different ways or different shapes and forms, and you can always find it on a food label here. The more protein you find in a product, protein helps keep you fuller longer. So again, we want to look for snacks and foods that are going to keep us full and satisfied. So again, like I mentioned, we have the percent daily values. And I always, for so long, thought that this was a very obscure thing to have on there because it's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Not everyone consumes a 2,000 calorie diet. Some people are consuming more, some people are consuming less. So really it's a guide. Use it as a guide, but I do have a simple rule for you to follow. If you're looking to see if a product is low or high in something, we call it the 5-20 rule. So if a product is low in something, it's going to be 5 or less. So if we look here, it says saturated fat is 1 gram, it's 5%. That's 5% of our day. That is what's recommended by the government for you to have, you know, for the whole day, it would be 5% out of 100%, right? So then we would know this would be a low saturated fat product, which is good because we want to consume less saturated fat, right? Then we have the other end of the rule, which is the 20%, and that would mean that the product is high in something. So if we look over here and we see that it includes 10 grams of added sugars, 20% of our day, then we would know that's at the higher end. Maybe we want to look for a different alternative if we can, okay? So then it also is important for some of those nutrients of concern at the bottom. Maybe your doctor just told you you should really increase your calcium because you're at risk for osteoporosis, especially the ladies out there. Maybe we start looking more at the labels and we see that this product is actually 20% of our calcium, which is still a higher product. So again, Those are things that you can try and look at. So low is 5% and high is 20%. So the 5-20 rule. The next thing, again, like I mentioned, those nutrients of concern at the bottom, things like your vitamins and minerals, but also fiber. Those are the things we definitely want to be getting enough of every single day. Fiber especially, and most of your vitamins and minerals come from nature. They're coming from fruits and vegetables, so don't overthink it. But it's funny to me that a lot of fruits and vegetables don't have a food label, right? If you go and pick up strawberries at the grocery store, there's no food label on there, right? Because they're good for you. You should have them anyway, right? But be aware of products that make it sound like they're being good and healthy, right? These like Bold House Farm smoothies. Has anyone seen these before? They're in the refrigerated case of the produce section at the grocery store. And it looks like there's like almost 4 cups of fruits and vegetables in there, right? Fruits and vegetables should naturally have tons of fiber. But if we investigate the food label, 3 grams of fiber for almost 4 cups of fruits and vegetables is not very much. A cup of spinach, it has almost 4 grams of fiber in it. So if we're talking that it should have 4 times that amount by what's in there, we should see that the fiber would be like 16 grams. If it really is giving us everything it's claiming in there, right? So that doesn't make sense, Brittany. If there's 4 cups of fruits and vegetables, how is it so low in fiber? They're removing the nutrition. They're basically juicing it, so there's a difference between blending something and juicing something. So if you have a juicer at home, the juicer does extract a lot of that fiber, which would be like skin on apples and a lot of the pulp. The pulp and the skin and all that gives you the fiber. So again, it's stripping a lot of that nutrition out of there. So just be aware of what's in your products. I would definitely try and stay away from something like this, and just if you are gonna want some type of green smoothie, make it yourself at home. Make it in a blender where you can contain all that nutrition in there as opposed to extracting out the good stuff. Inspecting the ingredients is something that I definitely recommend to everybody. This is such a critical piece and skill that you can really use and just continue to build on. You know, one of the most abundant ingredients in our foods these days is what? Anybody want to think of sugar? Sugar! Why?
It tastes good.
It tastes good. And
It's addictive.
It's addicting.
it's addicting. So there's a couple different things in our food system that makes foods addictive. It's salt, sugar, and fat. So it's no surprise that most of what is on the market is high in salt, sugar, and fat. They're addictive. They're going to make it taste good, make you eat more, and it's going to make the companies more money, right? But it doesn't make your health any better. They don't care about your health, right? They care about making money. So inspecting the ingredients is very important. For prime example, even as a dietitian, I have to be reminded. I'm at the grocery store the other day because Brian and I are going to make soup, and I'm looking at chicken stock. And he's like, hey, babe, does it have sugar in it? You wouldn't believe that a carton of chicken stock had sugar in it. So I had to even be reminded. So have a good accountability in your life that's going to remind you those things, right? So there's just so much that is added to our foods now, again, to make it taste good, to make you eat more, but also everything in this country is sold by weight. Salt and sugar can be easily added to things to make the product weigh more, which means the company gives you less and they make more money. So just being aware of that too. So wherever you can try and avoid those added ingredients and, you know, doctor up whatever you need to at home to make it taste good and to make it a part of your recipe, try and do that. Keep it simple. Yeah.
I make my own stir fry at home, and like I make the sauce and everything too.
Yeah.
And even the ingredients I found, they tell you to add cornstarch, sugar, salt, and like everything in, along with like the soy sauce and the teriyaki that I'm already using.
Right.
So all I can think of is I'm basically just having pure salt, like, and I'm trying to like find other ways to like minimize that, because it literally just wants you to put everything unhealthy in it for the sauce.
Absolutely.
So like aside from like cornstarch, what would be a good thing to like thicken it up? That's not like really like. not all up there for you.
Yeah, so we had a really great point. So even in recipes, they're encouraging you to add a lot of different ingredients to your recipe. Part of that is the food science aspect. It's to make a certain texture, consistency, and taste, right? I wouldn't be too afraid of cornstarch. It is more of a natural thickening agent. You could also add other thickening agents like adding pureed fruits and vegetables, not necessarily to stir fry, right? But you can add that as a thickener for other in other instances. But just even cutting back on how much you're adding can be beneficial. But making your own sauce is a great way to do it, right? Because if you pick up a sauce at the grocery store, I guarantee it, it's going to be a laundry list of ingredients, just like this is here. And just knowing what is in the ingredients list is great to know. Now, when you look at the ingredients list, everything is ordered by weight. So, if we see that at the very tippity top of our ingredients list, we see sugar, we would know that the product is going to have a lot more sugar in it than other ingredients. So, again, if we can even look at finding products that have less of something, we would hopefully find it at the bottom as opposed to at the top. Being aware of things like sugar, the partially hydrogenated oils like I mentioned before, enriched or bleached flours, because that would mean that it's not a whole grain. It would mean that it is probably a white product. Enriching, does anyone know what enriching means?
I see it a lot, but I never really
You
knew
see it a
meant.
lot, yeah. So enriching is essentially where maybe it's called wheat bread. It is using some wheat flour, but they're adding enriching, so they're basically like shooting it up with the vitamins and minerals that were originally taken out for the recipe and for the product. So that's why I always recommend getting the whole grain so that you don't have to worry about them enriching it. A lot of the enrichment, and some of it isn't necessarily a bad thing. They are going to add things like vitamins and minerals that make it more of a complete and nourishing product. And part of that too is because America lacks in getting balance. So they're trying to make sure that people aren't just walking around malnourished, so they do put a lot of that in there to help the public. So.
Brittany,
Yes.
is that a cereal box label?
This is a cereal box label. Yes, it is. Can anyone take a guess? Use any context clues?
Well, it's got raisins in it.
Raisin Bran.
It is Raisin Bran cereal. And what do we see? We see sugar. We see corn syrup. We see sugar again because there's not enough sugar. We see brown sugar. Oh, and there's sugar again. And brown sugar and syrup and sugar again and malt syrup.
Wait, what's malt syrup?
Malt syrup's just another form of malt would be from corn, right? Malt. Yeah. I looked that one up. So essentially, all of this, why is there sugar so many times? Because it is breaking it down into like, okay, what's in the oats in the product? Okay, and in parentheses, you'll see that there's whole grain oats, sugar, canola oil, molasses, and honey. Then they move on. They're talking about the wheat bits in the cereal. In parentheses, what is in there? Oh, sugar again. There we found it. So being aware of what's in your product is great. I do like to say cereal is like sugar in a box. Not the best thing for you. But there are better alternatives out there. Like I know the Ezekiel brand that makes the bread, they do make a cereal that's much lower in sugar, lower in some of these preservatives. So knowing what's in your product is important. As we already talked about. So now I've given you a lot of ways to read the food labels, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about claims and what those mean. Do we have another question over here? Okay. So there's so many different claims out there. I love this dietitian. She's great. She always makes these fun little bulletin boards in her school about nutrition. But so there's fat-free, there's natural, there's made with whole grains, there's made with real fruit, sugar-free, less sodium. There are so many claims that are really just can be put on a label, and then it makes us fall for what we think might be healthy. So it's important to know what these mean, so we're going to talk about it right now. So the nutrition terms, like low calorie means that it has 40 calories or less. So for example, there's sugar-free Jello over here. So theirs is in really small print, it says low calorie. So these are some of the things that maybe you've never even seen before on a label because you've never really paid attention. So just again, using your magnifying glass when you're at the grocery store next time can make you look at this stuff a second time. Low cholesterol might be in something like our egg beaters here. So it just means that has 20 milligrams or less for each serving. Then reduced, I love seeing this. There's reduced fat Oreos because, you know, if I'm eating Oreos, I'm really concerned about the amount of fat in those Oreos, right? So reduced just essentially, if you see reduced anything, it means that it has to have 25% less of that nutrition ingredient as opposed to the regular product. So reduced fat Oreos just means that it's 25% less fat than regular Oreos.
Did you see those new Oreos that have this much filling?
Yeah, they've got like the most stuffed Oreos. Yeah, crazy. They're always going to come out with one more thing to excite you because variety increases consumption, people. That's why our grocery stores are massive. Next, we have what is a good source of? What does that mean? Okay, so I had to laugh because Pop-Tarts are trying to make a comeback, right? They're trying to make it sound healthy. Oh, look, a good source of 7 vitamins and minerals just means that it has at least 10 to 19%. So remember, we learned that 5-20 rule, right? So 20% would mean that it was a really good source. This just means that it's a good source of, but it's not a high source of. Then we would have calorie-free, so they're just with people watching what they eat and having some alternatives. There are some different businesses out there that have calorie-free type products. Now, I challenge you to see what makes it calorie-free, okay? This caramel dip isn't just nothing. Look at the ingredients list and you will see something a mile long. So again, just because it's calorie-free doesn't mean it's good for you. And it would just essentially mean that it has less than 5 calories per serving. So you may see a beverage that has some hint of, you know, flavoring in there that may say calorie-free, and that could be for a good reason. Then we have fat-free and sugar-free. So you see here on the Kraft singles, it would just mean that it has half a gram or less of fat or sugar per serving to be called free of something. High in fiber, sorry I'm picking on Raisin Bran again. High in fiber, so again, high would mean that it would have that 20% or more for our day. But fiber can be extracted from plants or it can be man-made. You might see things like chicory root added to different things. That's a fiber. But fruits and vegetables are the way to go. Stick to your natural sources, okay? Your whole grains. Because again, bran is a whole grain. But what's making it Raisin Bran cereal is what we saw on a couple slides earlier with lots of sugar and lots of additives. All natural. When this came out, every dietitian just about had a heart attack. Because then, you know, I'm getting patients come to my office, oh, but I had these all natural chips. And I'm like, oh, yeah, really? Is that really that good for you? So, what does that even mean? Really, it's not regulated by the government. Anybody can put that it's all natural. It may really be all natural where it has very simple ingredients that come from nature, or it might be our friend Natural Cheetos up here. I don't know what's natural about Cheetos. You might want to inform me about that. But essentially it means that it doesn't contain artificial ingredients or preservatives, but that remains to be seen. Ingredients are supposed to be minimally processed. Again, this is a very vague term that can be, you know, switched around. So again, just because it says all natural, it could still include things like antibiotics that the animals were treated with, growth hormones, and other similar chemicals. So you might see all naturals on our goldfish, which makes it healthy, right? On other smoothies or even milks. We have another question, yes.
Yeah, so a lot of the things that say like all natural and stuff, when I look on the back it says sucralose on it. Or like when it says like sugar-free and stuff, and I have to check for that because it gives me headaches.
Sure. So that's a really great point. So a lot of all-natural or maybe low-sugar, sugar-free products could contain the ingredient sucralose. Sucralose is just another term for Splenda. Splenda is a a sugar substitute that, you know, makes products lower in calories and lower in sugar because it is a sugar substitute. So that's a great point. Doesn't necessarily mean that the product is more natural. Simply made, because, you know, companies have to put whatever they can on their label. This could mean that it has a short ingredient list, which I guess this does have a shorter ingredient list than, let's say, Raisin Bran. But this term really isn't regulated. A short list doesn't make it healthy. It's still got things like sugar and chocolate and whatnot in there. So next we have things like lightly sweetened. And again, this term really isn't very regulated. It could say touch of brown sugar, touch of honey. That really means nothing. It could still have a lot of sugar in it. In this case, there's still 10 grams of added sugar, which would be considered high. We see that 20 there, right? Organic. Organic is a term that can be beneficial. Some people really do want to get organic products. That is a lot of what my Mindful Market sells, which is great. Organic is great if you can get it. It can tend to be more expensive. Organic just simply means how it was processed on the farms, right? Whether it was growing in a field, whether it's the animals. It has to abide by certain government regulations for it to be called organic, but again, it doesn't mean that it's healthy. When it comes to plants, it's just made without pesticides or synthetic fertilizers. And animals, they can't be fed with any antibiotics or growth hormones, can't have that during their lifespan. But again, we see our friends Oreos over here, just because it says organic. This specifically says made with organic ingredients. So again, that doesn't mean that the whole product is organic. They could just be using a couple different ingredients that are organic, which, sure, that's nice. But again, it doesn't mean that it's actually healthy for you. Then we have gluten-free. Gluten-free is one that has really been up and popular the last several years because of people being more sensitive to gluten. Now, gluten-free means that it can't contain any wheat, rye, barley, or any of these crossbreads at all. So gluten is the protein found in wheat. So that's why it can't contain these other things here. In order for it to say gluten-free, it still can contain less than 20 parts per million of gluten, which is a very minimal amount. But if someone does suffer from something like celiac disease, which is a very intense allergic reaction to gluten, that's where you really have an allergy. Even that would be too high for them and they would have a reaction. So if you do have celiac disease or you're very highly sensitive to gluten, you would still want to check labels to make sure that the product would say that it wasn't even made in a facility with other gluten products. So you may find on a label that it'll say made in a facility with milk and dairy and, you know, gluten and things like that. And that's important for people who have a severe allergy. So it's not just on there to look good, look nice. It is for health reasons. I love when gluten-free labeling got really popular. Products that have no reason to be labeled gluten-free were being labeled gluten-free because people are like, oh, I'm following the gluten-free diet. So I had a patient who came in and said, oh, Brittany, I bought that gluten-free water. And I was like, well, there's no reason why water would need to be labeled gluten-free because water doesn't contain wheat or rye or barley or any of that. But they found it funny. And again, they were falling for those marketing schemes. They throw gluten-free on some and people think it's healthy. So just be aware of that. It doesn't mean that it has any less calories, and it can actually have less fiber because if it's not being made from one of these whole grains like wheat, rye, or barley, it's being stripped of some of that and it can have less fiber and less nutrition. Who's heard of GMOs before? GMOs stand for genetically modified organisms. So do you try and stay away from GMOs? No? Sometimes, maybe, kind of, don't really know what it means. Sounds nice, Brittany, tell me more? Great, I will. So, a genetically modified organism is a plant, animal, or microorganism whose genetic makeup has actually been changed in a lab. So, we think of our DNA, right? We got our DNA here, our DNA strands. So just as a visual example of what a GMO can do, is they could take the crops that maybe haven't been successful and change the genetic makeup of it to make it a more successful, maybe even bigger, more nutritious crop. So they can make crops that are more tolerant to the pesticides and herbicides that they're really trying to spray on them so that the product doesn't break down. They can also try and make things that are more pest resistant, because I know, at least for me, it's annoying when the deer eat away your garden, right? So again, they're trying to make things that are going to be more stable in the environment so that they can have more of a yield and these farmers can be more successful. So there's a lot of reasons why people go after GMOs. Yes.
So this isn't like, it's not the same as like crossbreeding a plant or anything. This is like they're specifically going into the DNA chain and switching things up?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So high-risk products for GMO, mainly just saying like what products are typically genetically modified, not that they're high risk. This is just what's typically changed. Things like meats, eggs, and even honey. Other crops would be things like cotton, soy, sugar, and even some fruits and vegetables. And again, because some farmers really find that this is beneficial for them to have a better harvest. So non-GMO has been slapped on product after product after product. And at this point in time, there's not a ton of research. It's still up and coming. So I would say that if you are trying to avoid GMOs, great. If you don't avoid GMOs and you do some non-GMO and some are GMO, at this point in time, I don't have enough research to say that you should avoid them. What we do see right now is that there is a concern that because they're changing around the DNA of things, that this could affect the gut health or even our endocrine system, like our hormones, and that they may be impacted. The nutrition at the end of the day is essentially the same because they're really only changing the DNA. They're not really changing too much of the nutrition content, but more research is needed. So if you eat and prefer not getting non-GMO, great. And if not, I wouldn't sweat it. No hormones added has actually been slapped on a lot of labels in regards to meat. So beef may receive hormones, and they can use this claim that there's no hormones added, but they have to show proof. And when it comes to pigs and hens, they cannot receive hormones, and they can't sell it if it's been treated that way. So again, don't fall for the marketing schemes. If you're gonna end up paying more just because you're buying pork that has no hormones added on it, then it's not really worth the money, right? Because it shouldn't anyway. No antibiotics is another one you might see. Antibiotics may be given to animals, help them grow faster and to prevent disease, just like the reason we take antibiotics, right? Milk from cows treated with antibiotics can never be sold because it is not fit for human consumption. So again, if you see on your milk that it says no antibiotics, then again, don't fall for that claim if you're going to end up paying more for it. They have to provide documentation if animals were raised without antibiotics, if they're trying to sell you meats, poultry, or eggs. Good source of antioxidants. Has anyone heard of antioxidants before? Antioxidants have been another thing that have been very hot in the media and the food industry recently. And this antioxidants are naturally found when it comes to vitamin A, C, E, and selenium. So ACE and selenium. ACEs. So those are where you're going to find natural antioxidants, which is found in a lot of your fruits and vegetables. Now, for it to say on the label that it has a good source of antioxidants, it just has to contain 10% of one of those nutrients. So again, we know the 5-20 rule. So it's just middle ground, really. So fruit bars, those frozen fruit bars might say they're a good source of antioxidants, and 7-Up, you know, trying to make it sound healthy, right? The cherry, it's antioxidant. Well, why don't you just eat some cherries and avoid this? You get your antioxidants that way, right? Made with whole grains. Again, made with whole grains doesn't mean it's 100% whole grain. You'll see that enriched flour is that first ingredient. If it was really made with 100% whole grains, it would say whole grain flour. Whole wheat flour is the first ingredient. So definitely be aware of that. So Cheez-It, sorry. Light in sodium does not mean low sodium. It just means that it has to have 50% or less sodium than their regular version. So if you see the regular tomato soup, this light and sodium version would just have to be half of what that sodium is. So it could still be very salty. So you would want to look for low sodium or no sodium added, no salt added if you really want to look for something like sodium. Omega-3s. Has anyone heard of omega-3s before?
Yeah.
What are omega-3s?
Fats.
Fats, yes.
Good fats.
Good fats, yes. Thank you for answering that. So good fats, and good fats are found in things like avocados, nuts, like we've got trail mix back there, things like that. So you may see that on a lot of different products because, again, people know that they want to try and get those omega-3s in their diet. Omega-3s help lower inflammation in the body, which can be helpful for our heart health, but try and get it from the real sources. So I love Jif put omega-3 on their peanut butter, but really to get the omega-3 of what salmon has, you'd have to eat almost the entire jar of peanut butter to get the same omega-3 content as salmon has. So don't fall for the claims, get it from the natural sources, okay? So let's practice. We've been talking all about how to read the labels, what to look at, what to just completely ignore because it's kind of bogus, right? So let's look at some things together. So we got some granola over here. So looking at the label and looking at the ingredients list, what do we think about this product? What do we think about the sugar? High, right? We see that 28%, right? And its serving size is really small. A cup is about the size of my fist, 2/3. I guarantee that a lot of us in this room will eat even more than 1 cup of granola for breakfast. Am I right? And you can also look at the ingredients list and see that high amount of sugar is evidenced by the ingredients in the list, right? We've got sugar, we've got molasses, oh wait, and more honey, right? All of those are going to be sugars. So maybe we can find a better alternative on the market. Maybe we make our own granola ourselves. Maybe we stick to oatmeal and try and sweeten it naturally with fruit. Next, I wanted to point out my Mindful Market because, you know, we're here and I love their products. This is their Nutty Quinoa Bytes, and these were actually my pictures. I love these Nutty Quinoa Bytes. They have samples up at the front, so if you haven't had them yet, definitely check them out. They're just so different than any like granola bar you can even get on the market. I love that their ingredients list is really short, right? We've seen some really long ingredients lists today, which is kind of scary and makes you really question what you're putting in your body. They do have some organic ingredients in their label, but overall, super simple, right? Sugar is not the first ingredient, which I'm a huge fan of, and they're using something more natural like honey. If we look at the added grams of sugar, it's not quite high. It's still below that 20%, which I'm happy about. It is more natural. We look at the protein, got high protein because of that quinoa. Quinoa is a vegan, vegetarian grain and vegan, vegetarian source of protein. And you can also see that it has a good amount of fiber, right? Fiber and protein help keep you fuller longer. So these are some of their bites. Definitely check them out up at the front. Great snack to have. I pretty much answered the question for you because I was so excited. Next we got veggie straws. Has anyone ever had these before?
Yeah.
They're fun!
No, they're veggie. It's in the name. It must be good.
Right? So what makes us think that maybe these aren't the most veggie-licious? Yes.
They have only 1 gram less than a bag of Doritos.
Oh,
I think Doritos are 8.
yeah.
So the fact that it's almost the same total fat as a bag of Doritos, you know,
Yeah.
leads me to believe that.
So we got a lot of fat up there, right? What do we notice about the fiber? If it has veggies, it should have a lot of fiber. And what do we notice about it?
Nothing.
Oh, that's
Mwah,
that
mwah. So we have a lot of things that would make it not high in fiber. So even though it has even though it's saying that, it's pulverized flour, right? And the flour is not going to have all that fiber in it. Also really low in protein. So again, not something that's going to help keep you fuller longer. It is garbage. And we do have a decent bit of sodium too, right? When I said earlier, if we're looking for something low, it would be 5%. That's got 10% of our sodium today. And this is probably just a snack for us, right? So, being aware of that. Cranberries, craisins. Gotta be healthy, right? It's dried fruit. What do we know about? What can we see here?
Cane sugar.
The portion
So
size.
there's
is
2
key.
ingredients, which is good. Oh, only a 2 ingredient product, but the second one is cane sugar. So most dried fruits, I do want you to be aware of, is that they are cooked in oil and sugar. So you do want to be aware of that. And the reason for the craisins being high in sugar is because has anyone ever eaten a regular cranberry in the bag? They're really tart, right? So it is going to take a lot of sugar to sweeten them up. So they do have cranberries that are just dried. You could also do, I prefer raisins because raisins are made from grapes originally, which are naturally sweet, so they aren't cooked in oil and sugar. But just be aware, because dried fruit isn't as healthy as most people think it is. You can also see it has a decent amount of fiber, but a lot of that sugar. Okay. They do have reduced sugar ones as well at the grocery store where they're not adding as much sugar, which again would be a better alternative. And we have some Sweet Harvest wheat bread. What do we think about the bread?
Enriched flour.
Enriched wheat flour. Is that a whole grain?
No.
Nope.
Nope. Because it'll say whole in the name if it is, okay? What else do we notice about it?
Corn syrup, honey, molasses.
There's not
Yep.
very much fiber in it.
Right, because it's not a whole grain, right? It's enriched. So this is just basically dyed white bread called wheat bread. So be aware of that for sure. Great job. You guys have learned so much today. So is it actually healthy? I want you to follow by a couple really simple rules, okay? Pay attention to not only the front of the label, but also the back of the label. Take time, know what's in your products, right? Understand that ingredients list. Take a look at products that are going to have fewer ingredients, just like a lot of what my Mindful Market offers is all very simple ingredients, more natural, and stocking up on your whole foods, right? So things like lean proteins, whole grains, like your brown rice, whole wheat breads, things like that, fruits and vegetables, all those things are going to be natural pantry items that you always want to have on hand. So remember, read the backs of the packs. Remind yourself that when you're at the store. Let your family and friends know. Teach your kids, teach your spouses, your friends, anyone else, just how important it is to know what's in your products, right? So always read and compare labels, right? Because if you are really going for a certain product, like let's just say crackers, you can always probably find a better alternative than maybe what you are normally getting. Make sure that we're eating proper portions, especially if you have certain weight goals in mind. And choosing foods that don't have added processed sugars, try and look for, if it does have sugar, that it's using a natural sugar. Or also trying to look for things that are low salt, high in fiber, and few ingredients. We also don't want to choose blindly, right? So I even have to be reminded to look at the back of the label sometimes to know, because we are creatures of habit. We're going to go in the store and get a lot of the same things all the time. Take a few extra minutes, know what's in your products, and even check out ahead of time. If you know, okay, when I go in the store I don't have a lot of time, you can find anything online now. Go on the manufacturer's website, see what's in the product so you know whether or not to go for that the next time you're in the store. Don't assume that one package is one serving of something, right? Don't fall victim to that. Any other questions? You guys have asked so many questions throughout today. Yes, we got another question.
This isn't a question, but when you popped up that Jell-O picture,
yeah,
I was like, okay, I have those Jell-O strawberry cheesecake temptation things in the fridge. I went to check it. One serving, like, there's 4 servings in one of those little plastic containers. That's ridiculous. It's like 130 calories for one serving.
Yeah.
So like, as soon as you said that, I don't know if you saw me like dash over to the thing. I was like, I have to check this now.
And again, I live by, and if anybody's worked with me as a client, they know, I live by moderation. right? You know, if we are gonna completely deprive ourselves of one thing or the other, we all have our own little guilty pleasures, right? But knowing what is in your product, knowing what the proper portion is, and trying to, you know, manage your eating habits, it's going to be the best way for you to have a healthy life, to have a sustainable, healthy lifestyle, and not just a diet that you're trying to follow that can't be stuck to. So really just being aware of that. Awareness is the biggest key.
I kind of got two questions. So, as far as like the vegetable, the oils, I make the vegetable oil. When I look at the ingredients, it will just say, you know, that it's vegetable oil. Does that mean that it's not necessarily added, I don't know, fats and stuff like that to it, or is that if
Sure.
it just says that?
So that's a great question. So when you're looking at what oils to use, like for cooking and things like that, that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
So sure, a lot of oils are just going to have one ingredient, oil, right? Which is good. So you know you're not getting something else that has other additives to it that you don't need.
Yeah.
But you do want to know, how is the oil being manufactured? How is it being processed? Because again, like we said, trying to look for something that's like extra virgin olive oil that was either cold pressed or expeller pressed, meaning that it is not using that high heat, which could damage the oil.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great.
Kind of stick to olive oil.
Yes, you know I'm an olive oil lover.
So, what do you think of avocado oil?
Avocado oil is actually a really great oil to use, too, because avocados are a good natural source of omega-3, so it is going to have that better heart healthy fat in there.
Okay.
So, yep.
Okay.
Great question. Yes. Yes.
So, comparison of like table salt to sea salt.
That's a great one. I get that all the time. So, is there a difference between sea salt and regular table salt? Not really. Now, there is a slightly different mineral content because sea salt comes from the sea, so it has some of the rocky minerals in there. But as far as the sodium content, it's essentially the same. So if you do need to watch your salt content because you have high blood pressure or other health concerns, please know that sea salt is not really the better alternative in regards to sodium.
What about the pink Himalayan salt? Is there anything better or worse than regular
Again,
salt? Same thing.
the pink Himalayan salt is still going to have essentially the same nutrition, same sodium. It just may have a little bit higher in vitamins and minerals, but guess what? We can make that up in many other ways.
So in comparison with that, what about like salt substitutes? Like what's, cause I know my grandma, she used to get the, like Morton salt substitutes.
Salt scents, yeah. So there are, we had a question about salt substitutes, which are on the market. So salt substitutes may be labeled as salt scents, which is using part salt and part potassium, or part another mineral that could kind of make up for that taste of the sodium, taste of the salt. Now, some people really do have to watch those other minerals based on either medications they take or other health concerns, like if you have kidney disease. So I would definitely talk with your doctor if that's a safe thing for you to do. My biggest recommendation is that your taste buds are going to change if you cut back on your salt intake gradually. And so just trying to reduce the amount you use in your cooking, trying to avoid having the salt shaker on the table can be another thing that you can do. And even using more things like garlic, herbs, spices, all those things can add a ton of flavor and you won't even miss the salt. So if you want more ideas on recipes that don't have added salt in them, check the internet has so many great salt-free recipes. You could follow us on social media. We always talk about high spice and herb content recipes. And even if there is salt in something, you don't have to add it, right? But again, just gradually cutting back can be a way to help modify your taste buds because they will change over time in just their sensitivity. I know we had a couple other hands up. Yes.
One's a story about portion sizes. And I love granola, and I know that granola is not the healthiest for you at all times. But check the labels of the products, even if it's the same brand. I'll call out this brand, Bare Naked Granola. I was looking, they had it on sale or wherever I was, and so I'm flipping all the packages around. Which one do I want? Which one's the healthiest? And I'm like, okay, this one's this many calories. The portion size on every package was different. And this was all granola, all the same brand, but every package was different. So some looked healthier than others, but so I will never buy that brand because they're misleading. It's just one thing. But I'm sorry if you were going to say something. Mike, a question I have is corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, they come from corn, and why are they not healthy if it comes from corn, if it's natural? Is it natural?
It's highly processed. Corn syrup, and corn is one of the most manipulated ingredients on the market. High fructose corn syrup means that it's extremely highly processed, and it has been shown to have very detrimental effects on our gut health. And gut health has been shown to be a predictor of our overall body health. And so we definitely want to try and avoid that as an ingredient as much as you can. Trying to stick with more of the natural sweeteners as much as possible is going to be better for you.
Thank you.
We have one over here.
When you say, when you heat oils at a high heat, what is considered like a high heat? Is it anything on the stovetop, anything like that, or?
That's a really great question. I would have to get back to you on that specifically, because one of the reasons is because some of the oils will be affected at different temperatures.
Right.
So let me get back to you after.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
Back to the gut health, like probiotics, I know are big. So I've been eating a lot of like sauerkraut. You know, like the Cleveland kraut, like that stuff's great because you can put like the salads. You know, you can put it with take it with hummus, put it on a chip. It's a good way. You know, I think it's like 10 calories per serving. So you can't really beat that. There's like 3 ingredients in it, and then you have probiotics. So yeah, that's why been one thing I've been trying to focus on is getting more of those probiotics. And you're just talking about the gut health. Which,
Yeah,
I believe definitely is a very, very big thing that people are still starting to finally realize.
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the comments that we had is, since I mentioned gut health and how there are things that are in processed products that can affect our gut health, one way to help protect your gut health as much as possible is getting in good sources of probiotics, including things like sauerkraut. And one of the things that my Mindful Market does carry is Cleveland Kraut, which is a local sauerkraut company. So they completely make their own sauerkraut from cabbage, which is really awesome. Their stuff is really good. So that's another great way. Other natural forms of probiotics would be like Greek yogurt, and there's other fruits and vegetables that are high too. So. Great questions today. Who learned something? Awesome. Love it. Great. Well, thanks so much again for coming. Please sign in if you didn't. You will be added to the weekly nutrition news, which I send out 1 email a week. Trust me, you're not going to get bombarded. Every Monday I send out different health information, recipes, as well as our upcoming events. So please stay tuned. Follow us on social media, and be sure to catch me after if you have more questions. So thank you again for coming today. Thank you.